Welcome to the Wealthy Woman's Podcast, a podcast for high-achieving women who are great at making money but struggle to build wealth. You'll learn how to take control of your money, increase your net worth, and make more. Ladies, it's time to create a life with more money and more freedom. Let's dive in. Well, hello there, everyone. Today's episode is going to be packed with so much insight that you will not want to miss it. So I don't know if you know this, but October is Estate Planning Awareness Month. And I knew from the very beginning of the year that during the month of October, I wanted to talk about estate planning with you all. This is a topic I have not tackled on the podcast yet, and I knew that I didn't want to have it alone. And so with that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Pamela Maass. Pamela Maass Garrett is an award-winning estate planning and asset protection attorney and CEO of Law Mother LLC, a law firm she founded to help parents protect their futures and loved ones. Pamela is also the author of the best-selling book, Legally Ever After, and she's on a mission to simplify legal, tax, and financial strategies for parents with over 2 million followers on social media. Speaking of social media, you all must go follow Pamela on Instagram. Her handle is @LawMotherCo. Oh my gosh, her reels are hilarious and educational. And I know that's kind of hard to do when it comes to a subject like estate planning, but they're so entertaining, but they're so educational at the same time. So during this episode, Pamela and I cover so many great topics that pertain to families and to women without children. So no matter who you are, you will be able to get so much value from this episode. Also, Pamela mentions that listeners of this podcast will get access to her book for free. So I want you to know that all of Pamela's information, including the link to her book, the link to her social media platforms, everything is in the show notes. So let's go ahead and get to the episode. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I am so excited because October is Estate Planning Awareness Month. And I knew from the very beginning of 2024 that in October, I really wanted to tackle the subject of estate planning. It's something I haven't talked about on the podcast yet. And I knew that I wanted to bring on an expert to have this conversation with. And with that, I'm excited to introduce to you all Pamela Maass. She is an estate planning attorney and someone that you are going to learn so much from. So without further ado, Pamela, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So before we get into it, you all, she has so many tips and concepts she's going to share with you all today. But before we get into that, can you just introduce yourself to the audience and tell them why you're so passionate about estate planning?
Yeah, so I am Pamela Maass. Some of you may know me as Law Mother on Instagram and social media. My business is called Law Mother, and we're an estate planning law firm that helps parents and business owners protect what matters most. And I'm really passionate about estate planning, really because of the experience I went through with my own family. So before I became a lawyer, when I was in high school, my grandmother's estate went through probate. And I just remember how awful it was and how stressful, and talking to my parents about it afterwards. And then when I became a lawyer and kind of looked into what had happened, I thought the firm that my parents worked with, my grandma worked with, had committed malpractice, but I found out what they did is actually very common practice. So that's really when I went to law school, I, worked in some other, in government, and then I worked for other firms. But when I launched my firm, it was really to make sure what happened to my family didn't happen to anyone else. And so that's why I really love sharing, doing these types of conversations, because I really want to make sure people are educated.
Oh, I love that so much. And I remember going through something very similar when my grandmother passed away. There was a lot of issues. I will just leave it at that. There were a lot of issues. And I feel like if she would have had a solid estate plan, then those issues may not have occurred. But you know what? So many of us, we just don't know what to do. We don't know where to start. We think that simply having life insurance or a will is enough. So I'm so glad that you agreed to have this conversation with me. Now, I have to tell everyone about your Instagram. You have an amazing Instagram feed, and I was on it the other day, and you talked about this concept of the 3 L's to protect your children. And so I want to dig a little deeper into them, but the 3 L's are legal guardian, term life assurance, and a live in trust. So wanting to dig deeper into each one of those, can you start with why it's so important to have a legal guardian, especially if you have children? Like what is that? Tell us all about it. Where can we get started with that? I mean, because that seems like a very, very difficult decision to make. Like, who's going to take care of my kids, if I pass away before they're 18? So just give us all the details.
Yeah. So legal guardians are, putting down in legal documents if something were to happen to you. And if you're married, your partner, if something were to happen to both of you, who would raise your kids if you could not? And, most of us don't, or most people don't know what would happen in that situation. So the default, if you don't put guardianship documents in place, is the state where you live, the government in your state is going to make that decision. So it's really a judge, a stranger, who is going to decide who will raise your kids. And it could be that the judge chooses someone you would never want, or it could be that your kiddo, in a worst case scenario, your kids could end up in government care, in foster care system. So the idea is having that conversation, getting a plan in place. So if that were to happen, things are taken care of. And I always recommend both short-term and long-term guardians. Short-term guardians are people who live close by that can be there in an emergency. And this might not be if something happens to you, could be an emergency, like, you're in a car accident, you're in the hospital, people are trying, you're not at the daycare. A lot of daycares and nannies will ask for your emergency contacts, but making sure you have the legal documents in place that they can actually take care. So short-term guardians are the people that live close by who can make your kids feel safe if your long-term guardians live out of state.
Awesome. That's such a nice and succinct way to just break it down. And I never thought about having a short-term guardian, because you think of, just what if something happens to me? I need to have someone like, the grandparents or whoever you're going to choose. But I never thought about short-term. So that's really good. Okay. So the other L is life insurance. And specifically, you recommend term life insurance. Can you share why you recommend term life over any other policies and anything else you want to share about that?
Yeah. So the idea with life insurance is if something were to happen to you today, is there the people you care about, is there money to take care of them? And I know for me, my husband's a stay-at-home dad, so he and my children rely on my income and my business to sustain. So if something were to happen to me and I wasn't able to earn an income, then, it'd be very challenging for them. So the idea is having enough of life insurance, when someone dies unexpectedly, those are kind of those first conversations that the people left behind have are, how do we continue paying the mortgage payment? How do we maintain our quality of life? And so, I feel like some advisors talk about, 10 times your income. It's really whatever you feel comfortable with for the people you love. When it comes to the type of life insurance, obviously work with a licensed professional, work with someone like you who is coaching around this of, creating a plan custom for you. The reason I like to start with term life insurance is because it's really affordable and, whole life insurance. So term life insurance, you're typically doing like a 20 or 30-year term. So it's more affordable because if you don't pass away in that term, they're not going to pay it out. So the premiums are much more affordable for people. So for, I would say for me, I just got a quote. I'm 42. I'm like, how old am I again? I just turned 42. And I just got a quote to increase mine. So I have a $3 million policy, and I'm going to add another $3 million. And it was under $150 a month to do that on my life. A few years ago, when I got like my first $1 million policy, I feel like it was like under $50, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's very affordable, and it's really just that peace of mind so that your loved ones, aren't having to do a GoFundMe when something happens to you. And it's covering you during your working years, right? So, the idea is, especially for the people that are working with you, that you're going to be building the wealth throughout your working years. Your retirement's going to be taken care of after that time, like after you're 60 or 70, your family won't have to worry because, your kids will have their own jobs, and your spouse will have your retirement. So it's really just covering if the unexpected would happen right now. I feel like it's pretty uncontroversial. Fees are low, it's affordable, and it's giving you that peace of mind. I know I have the peace of mind every time I get on a flight, where I'm like, if something were to happen to me, we don't like to think about it, but if something were, I know my kids and my husband would be taken care of. And then as a business owner, right, I'm also have a policy that to cover my business, because I have 10 other employees, 11 total. And I want to make sure that my business would carry on and that our clients would be taken care of. And so if you're a business owner listening, life insurance is also good for that, making sure your business would be taken care of. I don't know your thoughts on whole life insurance. Whole life insurance, you are covering your whole life. So it's a guaranteed payout. So those policies are a little bit more expensive to set up. There's more fees, and they are not right for everyone. I would say there's certain circumstances where my high net worth clients use them for estate tax minimization. I have other clients that use it to create like a family bank, but I would say, depending on your life situation, it's not always the best use of your money. So I'll leave it at that. You definitely, before investing in a whole life policy, want to do your due diligence on the fees, work with a licensed professional, get good recommendations.
Yes, I 100% agree with everything you said. And term life is just simple. It's easy. You don't have to learn a ton before you make, the decision. It's simple. If you do a 20-year term life policy, you know exactly what you're getting. Of course, you want to make sure you work with a reputable company, make sure it's AAA rated and all that good stuff. But other than that, I 100% agree that term life is the way to go. Okay, so the third L is living trust. And that sounds a little complex. So can you break that down for us?
Yeah. So a living trust is one part of your estate plan. So I'll back up and say for the first part that there's this big myth out there that estate planning is only for, billionaires. And it really isn't. It's for everyone. And when you set up a estate plan, there's a lot of different documents that go together to make it work. And you want a strategy. You're not just getting the documents, you want everything. But one piece of that strategy is what's called a living trust. And that's short. The longer framework for it, the longer word is a revocable living trust. Revocable meaning you can change it throughout the rest of your life. Living, you've set it up in life. And it's a legal document. And I like to compare it as a substitute for a will. So if you set up a trust, you'll still have something called a pour over will, which I can get to in a minute. I don't want to get too down in the weeds. But when you die with no estate plan in place, what happens is you have everything titled in your name. And then the court gets involved through a process called probate to move things out of your name. A lot of people think a will is enough, but when you die with a will, you're just giving instructions to the judge. So it's still going through probate. What a trust is you're creating this agreement in life and you're saying where you want everything to go. But the structure of it, you move everything into your trust while you're alive. So if you had the Germain Living Trust, you would set it up. In the trust, you would move all of your assets into it while you're alive. So your real estate, you would move into your trust. Your business, you would move into your trust. You'd put your trust as the beneficiary on everything. And then you've made that transfer in life. So you're not dying with things in your name. Everything's in your trust. And so it avoids probate, saving that time and money. And you have a lot more flexibility. So a lot of times I use the analogy of like a business. If you think of things like, Pepsi or Nike, those are entities that survive beyond the first level, like the first owner. It's similar, right? A trust is an entity that is holding all of your assets that can survive you. And with it, you get the, advantages of avoiding probate, but you also get a lot of other advantages that we can talk through, where you get incapacity protection, you get asset protection for your loved ones, you get more flexibility of how things are going to be distributed. You just get a more comprehensive support. So that's kind of an overall, and then we can dive more into the details.
So I have a question. So let's say someone's listening and they're like, okay, I am ready to do all of this. The first thing I'm going to do is get a term life insurance policy. Could the term life insurance policy be paid out to the trust? So could you put your trust as a beneficiary for your term life policy?
Yep. Yep. So you can put the trust as the beneficiary of your life insurance. And then, most of us, our children, if you have minor children, they're not going to be able to manage that money. So in the trust, you'd say, this is who I want to manage the money for my kids. And you can use backup people. You can, say my brother. And then if he's not available, my sister. And if he's not available, my friend. And then you can also have specific guidance, right? So you can say you want to stagger distributions over time. We know that most people, when they inherit large sums of money, they don't make good choices. And so you can build that framework in. So however you want it designed, it could be staggered over time. It could be have a co-trustee managing it for them. It could have, a family mission statement. There's a lot of flexibility.
Okay, that's so good. And I like the fact that you could say, hey, every year my kids will get this amount of money. And you can even probably decide how the money would be invested. Is that right?
Yeah, so you can put as much flexibility or as much restriction as you want. Typically, I like to advise my clients to have if you have minor children, right, you're going to be putting adults in charge. If you have adult children and you're like, they're just not great with money, you can have them have some support by someone that is, and you can give guidance like, hey, these are the types of investments I want. But you also want to build some flexibility in because you don't know what the market's going to be. So if you really bind it and you're like, it can only be invested in this type of index fund or this type of real estate, it's not enough flexibility.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so before we get into your 5-step legacy framework, which I am so excited about, can you talk a little bit about another thing I saw on your Instagram account, which was creating and setting up a legacy contact?
Yeah. So if you are an iPhone user, you may not realize if something were to happen to you today that people wouldn't be able to access your phone unless you've given out the passcode, right? So one option is making sure that as you update your passcode, you're letting people know what it is, the people you love and know and trust. But Apple has a really great feature where you can actually select a legacy contact and give them, access and give them a password. And it's really easy if you just Google legacy contact Apple, it will pull up the settings and you can just go in and name that person.
That is so cool because I think in the past there have been situations where people just couldn't even get into their loved ones' phones and it was a big deal. So I'm glad that, Apple, we live in a digital world now. So I'm glad that Apple and maybe other, digital creators will help us navigate through things that are inevitable. We are all going to transition out of this life. So it's great to know that the digital companies are helping us do that more seamlessly. Okay, so are you ready to talk about the 5 steps, the legacy steps that you have outlined in your book, and just share all of those things with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is Legally Ever After, and it's the plan to protect your children's future and happiness. And I think we're going to share a free link for your audience to download for free. So I can share that. So the first L is, so the 5 steps spell the word legacy. And the first step is legal guardians, which we covered already. So that's the first step, making sure you name legal guardians. The thing that I will add here is something that you mentioned when we were talking about it a moment ago, which is, how do you get through with your making that decision? Like, who is that person going to be? And especially with your partner or your spouse, if you have a significant other. And so I usually recommend especially if you have a partner, both kind of brainstorming a list of people, just separately, don't judge each other's lists, but just both take a few minutes and write it down. And then take a moment and write down some criteria. Like, what are we looking for? So it could be like, I know when my husband and I did this, we wanted someone, people that lived in Colorado where we are, because we wanted our kids to not have to experience, a major move. It may be that you want certain parenting values, and that's, one of the criteria. So go through and like come up with 3 to 5 things that is important to the two of you. And then once you have that and you guys are agreed on what that is, then you look at those people on your list and kind of rank them of, do they meet this criteria? And the nice thing about doing that is it gives you a framework to make the decision. So I know you're a life coach, and so we know how our brain, right? When we start going spiraling and talking, and it really helps eliminate a lot of that bickering back and forth, right? And that decision paralysis where you're like, I just can't even think of anyone. Well, what if you could think of someone? What if you could think of criteria? What if you could think of those people? So that would be the first L in the framework.
Awesome. So I remember when my husband and I were going through this process. So my kids are 19 and 17. So this was a while ago. And it was kind of nice to have the lawyer there bouncing things off of us, because immediately I was like, well, my sister, who's the older sister, so I'm the oldest, but she's, the middle sister, then I have a younger sister, both will be amazing guardians for my kids. But the middle one, she lives in California, and the lawyer was like, you sure you want to send your kids to California? And I was just like, I had to think through it. It wasn't that I said yes or no, but it was good to have him say that, because California is a lot different than where I live. And it was just a good question. So it's nice to have someone like yourself, a professional, available to help you create these things and to think about different aspects, the parenting styles, where they're going to live. Are they willing to relocate to where you are if, God forbid, something happened to you?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your experience. And I think you touched on something that a lot of people, feel, where you're like, I don't want to think about it. But then it's so much, once you actually start thinking about it, you're like, I do have some people that I would put down.
Absolutely.
And the good news is I've never seen any connection between people putting a plan in place and then something unexpected happening, right? I think some of us are afraid of like law of attracting it. But no, I've never seen any connection. So being prepared is always great. Yeah. So the next is E for economic support. And in that step, I talk about life insurance. But the other thing I also talk about that's very helpful is grabbing a file folder, whether it's digital or kind of your old-fashioned one, and putting the first page of everything you have. So I had a good friend whose father passed away unexpectedly a few years ago, and he had nothing in place. And so she had to go through all of his mail, contact former employers, go through his computer files, trying to figure out what assets he had and where it was. It was extremely overwhelming on top of her grief. She's still not sure if she has all the assets. And this is how things get lost in the Department of Unclaimed Property. Every state has a lot because people don't realize that. So yeah, just grab a file folder, put the first page of everything you have, and let someone you know, love, and trust know where that is if something were to happen. And then if you do meet with an estate planning lawyer to put together a plan, that's the first thing that they're going to want you to do is get that organized so that you can have a conversation about how everything's going to flow.
Awesome. I love that. Okay. So how about G?
So G is guidance. And I always describe this as, a lot of us have worked somewhere where we have an employee handbook. I like to think of this as your parenting handbook. If something were to happen and you have young kids, or if you have adult kids and you want to give guidance of how, for young kids, it's, what are those educational beliefs? What are those spiritual beliefs? What are those things and experiences you want your guardian to know? And if you have older children, it's some of the things that we touched on, like what is important to you of how they spend the money.
What if it were possible that you could set yourself up to be financially secure without suffering? What if you could go to spas, travel, and have a fabulous wardrobe while still saving, investing, and paying off debt? Listen, I know that society has taught us that these things can't coexist, but I want you to know that all of this is possible for you, and I'll show you exactly how in my new free training titled How to Build Wealth Without Going on a Strict Budget. In this on-demand training, you'll learn 3 things. Number 1, how to adopt what I call the do both mindset, which allows you to build wealth and enjoy life at the same time. Secondly, you'll learn how to figure out what it means for you to enjoy life. And here's the truth. It's different for all of us. And I want to help you figure out what it actually means for you so that you can make it a priority in your life. And number 3, you'll learn how to build wealth on a consistent basis. This is all about creating habits that will make wealth building a natural part of your life. Now, you can get access to this free on-demand training right now by simply going to the show notes or by going to jermainefoley.com/wealth class. That's Jermaine with a G, Foley.com/wealth class. See you in there. Yeah, I like that because I think it's important. I think you're going to touch on this in a little bit. It's important for them to know your values, right? I think it's just good. That'll give you peace of mind, but it'll also help guide them along the way, especially if you have younger adult children who inherit, a bunch of money, that will be a great way to just kind of guide them a little bit so they don't feel so lost. I mean, they're already going to be grieving. This is just a gift that you can give them,
Absolutely. And then the other component of guidance is your guidance around your own health decisions. So if you're ever incapacitated, what are those decisions? Do you want to be on life support? Do you not? Who do you want to step in and manage your financial and medical affairs? So that is the other component of guidance.
Awesome. Okay. So now that means we're on to A.
A is asset protection. And this is really kind of what we touched on, which was the difference between a will and a trust, and being able to be sure you have the framework, the documents in place to protect your assets. And especially if you're a business owner, if you own real estate, if you have minor children, really making sure you're getting that trust in place to protect your assets.
Okay. Sounds easy enough. And I'm sure the book goes much deeper into that. So make sure you grab the book if you want to know more. And then we'll go on to C.
So C is carry through, communicate, and update. And this is where a lot of people's plans fail, is they go and they meet with an estate planning attorney and they get everything in place and they put it on the shelf, and 20 years goes by and they don't touch it. And they pass away and everything's out of date, right? So really kind of get in the habit of reviewing everything. We always say at least every 3 years or after any major life change. So, that might look like, as you're kind of doing your taxes every year, you're doing your annual things, just making sure your asset inventory is up to date, making sure the people you have listed there are still the people you'd want, make sure things haven't changed with your assets, the dynamics, your choices, and just be sure to keep it up to date.
Okay, so I have a question. If you have a will, is there an expiration date on that will, or does it just live on until you update it?
It's just, it's valid. It's just going to live on until you update it.
Okay, that's good to know. But to your point, you want to update it. You don't want to have it, the same will, and you had it for 30, 40 years and never looked at it again. So that's such a good point.
And I think there's 2 components, right? Like, one, you want to keep your asset inventory up to date because every year you're getting new things. And so something you did 20 years ago, you're going to be in the same situation. Your kids are going to be like, wait, where is their retirement account? Where is their life insurance? What do they have? Because you haven't looked at it, right? So that component needs to be updated as you get new assets. And then, if you've made different decisions about your end of life choices, about who you want receiving what. Maybe there's grandkids that you want to give things to.
Mhm.
You want to at least change it, look at it at least every 3 years or after major life changes.
Okay, awesome. So that leaves us to why.
So, why is your legacy? And I like to describe this as your loved ones want more than your legal documents and your estate plan to remember you by, right? They want all your values and insights and stories. They're not going to be snuggling up with your estate planning binder after you die. They're going to miss you. And so, this is really capturing all of those intangibles. So, we live in an age, I know we're on Zoom right now, where it's so easy to, do those legacy interviews is what we call them.
Mhm.
But take out your phone or video. I do it with the grandparents where I'm just recording them saying advice for me and the kids, capturing that stuff and then your own advice. Just take 20 minutes every year, maybe around New Year's and write down, record yourself talking to your kids about what's going on and what you hope they take away.
Oh my gosh, that would be such a gift to receive. And especially if they didn't even know you were doing it and that happened, you passed away and then you had that available to them. That would just be beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. So I love step-by-step frameworks. They are such great tools. So for anyone who's just starting out with their estate planning journey, where do you recommend they begin with this framework? Which letter?
L.
There you go.
Beginning. Start at the beginning. Yeah. And you can download the book for free at lawmotherco.com. It's right there. And I would say it's a good first step to the book is very, very simple examples, very story driven, short and sweet and to the point. But yeah, I would say if you're getting started with all of this, I would say the first step is grab a file folder and put your assets in it and just tell someone where it is. If you walk away with one thing from what we're talking about, just get that piece started. I think that's the hardest part. And that's the piece that would bring the most peace of mind to your loved ones if something were to happen.
Yes, and put it in like a fireproof bag or a fireproof safe somewhere in your home where everybody knows where it is and it's protected.
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of women, I won't say a lot, but some of the women listening to this podcast may not have children. And so I know your content often highlights how crucial estate planning is for families with children. But what about women without children? Is estate planning still essential for them? If so, which aspects should they prioritize?
Yeah, I love that. So we work with plenty of clients that don't have children. And I would say kind of the first thing that always comes up for them is incapacity planning. If I was to become incapacitated today, who would step in and manage my financial and medical affairs? So making sure you have that laid out. You can still read the book and understand everything. It's all L won't be applicable, but the rest of the steps will be applicable. And so I would say incapacity planning is usually where a lot of them want to start. So I would start there. And then thinking through your legacy. Where do you want things to go when you pass away? And for some of my clients, they wanted to go to family. Some of them wanted to go to friends. Some of them have charity. Some have all of the above. The important thing to know is if you don't have a plan, the default is going to be the government's plan. And if you're in most states, it's going to be, if you have parents, it's going to go to your parents first. And if your parents aren't alive, then it's going to go to siblings. And so for a lot of my clients, the people that they wanted to go to aren't necessarily what the state's laws are. So it's your chosen family or the people that you or the causes you care about. So that's where the real power is, it's crafting your legacy. What's important to you, all the things you spend your whole life working to create in this world, making sure it carries on in a way that's consistent with you and your values.
Oh my gosh, Pamela, I think that's the perfect place to wrap things up. I think you've covered so much and have given my audience so many things to think about. And I wonder if I know you gave us some things you think we must do, start with L, but if you can leave them with any final words of advice or inspiration, what would you say? And then let us know how we can stay in contact with you, because I know the book is available, but are there other ways my audience can keep in contact with you if they want to hire you or work with you? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I would say, estate planning is one of those things that people tend to put off until it's too late. So, if this is something that would give you peace of mind today, knowing that it's all set up, just take the first step. And uh, every time people go through the step of doing their planning, we always hear on the other side that it was much easier than they thought. It was a very, like some people, it's a very transformational process because you're going to the end and thinking about the end of your life, which it can be very powerful for your goals. I've had people who've come to me where they're like, you know what? I don't have anyone in my life that I would trust. And it really is this like shift in them of like, I want to focus on building some stronger relationships. Or a lot of moms will come to me and they're like, I don't want to burden anyone. And then they go and have the conversation, and the family members are like, we'd be honored. And then those family members take a more active role in the children's lives because they, see how important it is. So I think that's one of the things that is, always like such a joy for me and our team, is the unexpected ways that doing this type of work just, improves people's lives, because it really isn't about your death. It's about your life and your legacy. So those would be my my lasting words of inspiration, that people that, look at it as a transformational process. And because I know your audience, cares about coaching and self-development and personal development, when you get a place of discomfort with doing the planning, listen to it, and what is the lesson and what are the things that you can learn from it? And getting to the other side of that is very powerful for people. As far as staying in touch, Instagram, LawMotherCO, that's a great place to stay in touch. That's where, in the DMs and in the stories. And then currently our law firm is based out of Colorado. We work with families in Colorado. As far as if you're outside of Colorado, definitely feel free to look at the resources on my website and on my Instagram. We're continuing to be putting out more things so the book is written for a national audience. The book gives national resources, and then we're in the process of working on creating more resources for people on a national level. So stay tuned.
That's exciting. That's so
Yeah.
exciting. Well, Pamela, thank you so much for joining us for National Estate Planning Awareness Month. You kicked us off very well for the month of October. Now, ladies, it's just time to put some of this advice into action. All right. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye. Hey, before you go, if you're ready to create a life with more money and more freedom, then you're invited to join the Wealthy Woman's Academy, my signature coaching program where you'll learn how to take control of your money and build wealth without sacrificing your lifestyle. To get started, head on over to jermainefoley.com/WWA. That's Jermaine with a G. See you over there. Bye-bye.